Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have two very special guests with us today. We've had them on before, and by popular demand, they are back again. We have Dr. Marianne Rice, and we have Harriett Janetos with us. Yay! So, welcome, welcome. And we are going to be talking tonight about an article, actually a guide that came out called Teaching Phonemic Awareness in 2024, a guide for educators. And there were some heavy hitters who were part of this guide. We have Jane Ashby, Megan Martin, Marianne McBride, Shira Naftal, Ellen O'Brien, Lucy Hart Paulson, and Louisa Cook Motes. And so we are going to be discussing this guide. And one thing that Judy and I are very proud of is we don't shy away from controversy. So Judy and I are offering services and we are doing some consulting work. And this summer, we're going to be doing retreats. And what's a little bit different is we will talk about difficult topics. And sometimes people will have mixed feelings about those topics. And we don't tell people how to think. But we do think this platform is a great way to get people to know both sides, or maybe more than two sides, because a lot of times we believe what we hear when we hear a certain name attached, whether it's a journalist or a researcher or an edu celebrity. And we really think it's important to present different sides. That's why it's called the Literacy View. And we are proud that we're going to be working with teachers and administrators and trying to change the status quo. So if you would like to get in touch with us, please go to theliteracyview.com and you will see our list of services there. And you can always message us and we would be happy to speak with you.
Yep, and our email address, just to remind everybody, it's faithandjudy@gmail.com. Once again, faithandjudy@gmail.com. And you could also now advertise with the Literacy View as well. So let's get this party started, ladies.
Yay. All right. So let's talk about this guide, a guide for educators. I read this and, I'm really confused. I'm confused, and I've been doing this now a long time. And I've been working with many different programs. And when I started out with the National Reading Panel, for us, it was kind of clear, I thought, that it was more effective to use letters at the onset. And then we went into a phase, a David Kilpatrick phase, where we had, phonemic awareness in the dark. And then we were swinging back to what I thought I knew. And now it seems like we're swinging back to more of the Kilpatrick type of auditory exercises. So I'm going to throw this question out to Dr. Marianne Rice. She's been doing a lot of work in this area, and congratulations on your award 2025 recipient, co-recipient, for the work that you do, and we're very happy to have you with us. Please try to sort some of this out for us, because there are obviously very good things in this and very confusing things, at least from my point of view and our point of view, I think. So if you could clarify some of this, that would be very helpful.
I will do my best. And thank you so much. I'm excited to be back. And thank you for the, recognizing the award. So I will say, I want to shout out Harriett, that she sent this to me and was like, have you seen this? I'm confused. And so it's always great because I very much want to get the message out to practitioners. And so I loved that people in the field were reaching out and saying, like, what's going on? I thought this was settled again. I thought we were moving in this other direction. And so, although I agree with a lot of what is in this guide, there's one part in particular that we've talked about that just as still seems to be confusing. And so they talk a lot about, again, whether we should be using letters, or they seem to be supporting very much that there needs to be oral only phonemic awareness all the time for students to really get phonemic awareness. And some of the things they talk about, which I can go in even more, some of the studies that they talk about, some of the things they cite aren't really represented well. And then, of course, they don't seem to include any of the research that we've done with recent meta-analyses that other people, there's been even another one since ours came out that again supported that when you compare phonemic only, oral only, phonemic awareness instruction to print-based instruction, that it doesn't hold up. Print-based instruction is effective for teaching kids these reading skills, which is what the goal is, you know. And so it seems to me that they still want to support this oral only. And although there's parts of it and how they talk about it that they seem to contradict themselves a lot, especially in the letters part where they say, we know that letters are more effective, but yet you should do tokens all the time and not letters. And so it's just still a little confusing, but happy to talk more about some of the studies in particular that they mentioned in there, or the ones they left out of their
So
topic.
I think now if we're confused, can you just imagine what other people are thinking? You know, I think we all have a lot of experience, and you know, we've been around the corner, and you know,
Of course we have. You know what, Faith? You know what they call me? Judy from the block.
you'll start doing your dance. Anyhow, so it's very confusing. So my friend Harriet also sent me the same thing. She's always the one sniffing it out, saying, Faith, did you see this? And I appreciate that so. And she started a Substack that I suggest all of you look for Harriet's Substack. And it's making sense. Am I saying?
Making words make sense.
Making words make sense. Harriet is also the author of From Sound to Summary, and we talked about that last time. And the blog that she recently wrote was When the Experts Disagree, What Do the Teachers Do? Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, what do the teachers do? I'm wondering, because, you know, why can't the researchers seem to agree? It's so odd to me. Isn't that what research is supposed to be? That great piece of objective data that we could all sit around and say, yes, 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 it all makes sense. Harriet, tell us what you're thinking. You're in the trenches.
Right.
What's going on here?
You mean describe the confusion or how to deal with confusion?
Well, both. You could describe the confusion a little and then just tell us from your point of view what you think is going on.
Sometimes the answer comes because we simply don't have time to do both. And I mentioned in this blog, the Substack, that I found myself, or do I mention it? Or do I mention another one? They all begin to blur together. But when I found myself teaching kindergarten, yes, I do mention it. I had a short period of time. So for efficiency's sake, and I had just read the Bruce McCandless, Isabel Beck word building study from a very long time ago. I think it's the early 2000s. And I found Isabel Beck's book, Making Sense of Phonics, which had all the word building chains in the back. And it saved my life because it was so efficient. So I discovered it out of necessity because it was half-day kindergarten, so I didn't have the time, and it worked, and so I've never looked back. So when an oral only program that we all know became popular about 5 years ago, it was easy for me to reject. But if you haven't come in contact with the studies, if you don't have a personal experience, it really is very difficult and very confusing. I'm wondering if Marianne could maybe clarify one thing. Both David Kilpatrick and this guide say that we have got it wrong if we think the National Reading Panel recommended with letters. If I have this correct, what they say is there is an initial period with tokens, but then they lumped those studies in with studies that just did letters right from the beginning. And that, if I'm right, they're saying we need to tease it out. And they're saying oral only is actually what the studies show because of that distinction. Can you clarify that?
Yes, so they are correct. When the National Reading Panel coded for whether the study used letters, some of those that went into that category may have had several lessons that did oral only, and then they started adding letters in. And so that might have gone in that group, or they might have used letters all along. It was both. And so they are correct in that. And so we can't say 100% like, oh, well, which one works better between those two, like using letters all along? Do you do some oral only? And then move the letters, or do you do it all in the same lesson, like you were talking about for efficiency? So we know there's lots of studies around Elkonin boxes. These are very effective, right? So having a student segment the word cat and push the tokens up, but then immediately try to connect it to letters is what's likely most efficient for students, right? So even if your students are only learning a few letters at that point, right? They've learned T. You could say immediately, like, what sound did we hear at the end of that?
Right.
Let's remove that token and write a T, or use a letter tile for that one because we know that letter and we're trying to connect it. It's interesting that in this guide, they tried to use one study to justify their point. And so I wrote this down because they wrote in here that that there was a study that showed that students who used tokens that had no letters and students who used letter tiles, that these two groups of students learned at the end, they were able to segment phonemes with the same level. So there wasn't a difference. And so they're saying this shows that letters aren't better than tokens, is how I read how they wrote it. But this Aries study from the 80s, from a really long time ago, actually found something that they left out. And so it did find that on untaught phonemes, that the students did the same. So if you taught with a few of the letter tiles and they learned how to segment words with those phonemes, then you tested them on some words that had different phonemes, those two groups, whether they use just tokens or the letter tiles, perform the same. But the students who used the letter tiles were better at segmenting words with the phonemes that they had been taught on the letter tiles. They were able to do that. And the last sentence of Aries, it says this. It says, letters provide learners with a mental symbol system for representing and thinking about specific phonemes. So why would we use tokens only when we could use letter tiles and they're going to learn the phonemes faster and have something to hold on to with that? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, you know what? I'm calling Judy in. So now Judy is a coach, as you know, in New York City, K-2. This is the ideal age group for this discussion. And I'm listening to this, and I know from my experience, my experience is very similar to Harriet's. And so I've had the phonographics training. I'm a big advocate of speech to print. And we always used, from the onset, letters to build phonemic awareness with all the manipulations with the letters right there. And I brought Sounds Right, which is also a speech to print program, into a district on Long Island. In kindergarten and first grade, they were writing better than they ever did and understanding without a separate phonemic awareness program. So I've seen it with my own eyes in whole class. I've seen it with my own eyes one-on-one for many, many years. Judy, what are you making out of all this? You know that Hegarty, so I'm going to say the program just briefly, was brought in many years ago, probably because of this discussion and the work of David Kilpatrick, and they built a program around all of that. What are some of your thoughts? Do you think that your kindergarten teachers need to do phonemic awareness exercises without letters? Are they doing that right now? What exactly, where are you in this discussion right now in your personal experience?
Well, my history with Elkonin boxes and phonemic awareness is pretty extensive. And I have to really be honest, my training with Elkonin boxes started in reading recovery back in 2013. It was a really big piece of the writing portion of reading recovery. So I am very grateful for that training. You know, everybody gives reading recovery a fully bad rap. Yes, there were many flaws, but my training in Elkonin boxes was pretty spot on. And it was a big, powerful part of my journey and why I think I'm really strong in teaching kids to hear sounds and write letters that connect with the sounds. Going back to that journey, I actually presented on that journey and I did a paper about the progression of Elkonin boxes. And that progression was, we started with the tokens, but we were encouraged to move very quickly away from the tokens. It was supposed to be like 1 or 2 lessons with tokens and then quickly accelerated. It was always about accelerating. And then we moved from accelerating into CVC words very quickly, where we were quickly trained to, you know, transfer writing the graphemes and so forth. So that part was spot on. The only part that I think wasn't spot on, and Faith and I have talked on the air, was a component that was called spelling boxes, because actually in my reading recovery training, we always thought about accelerating. So I do appreciate, you know, quickly transitioning, because it did help us move data quicker, especially in the writing portion. The spelling boxes was the tricky part for me, though. We were trained to actually, at least I was, for vowel teams and so forth, we were trained to make a box for each sound. And instead of pushing, we were trained to start sliding across, and the prompting used to change. So it would be like, if the word was steam, we would say steam. Okay, what sound do you hear? What sound do you hear? And then we would be prompted to say, okay, what spelling pattern would you expect to see? I've transitioned. Faith pushed me a little bit. Not a big deal. I think the process of changing into a spelling box was good, but instead of maybe separating the vowel team, I would now probably put it into one box and maybe to distinguish, maybe put 2 little lines. But I think that my training in accelerating and connecting letters and sounds was powerful stuff, and I'm still really proud of that training. Now, getting into the coaching days, reading recovery went out of style, and then I moved into my structured literacy world, which is a big part of my life. Hegarty was the big thing that came into New York City schools and in many schools across the country. And the initial version of Hegarty did not include a lot of the letters, the connection. It was a lot of, you know, sounds only in the dark. And then they quickly realized that they better change, because new evidence and research came out. So they came out with a new version very quickly. I hope their intentions were pure and it wasn't just about making a buck. And they came out with the 2022 version, which was the updated version, which I see a lot more connection to seeing letters. And my teachers have appreciated that. It's helping us move the data more seamlessly. There's a lot of writing words and actually writing the letters that connect with the words. And I think it's helping data move more quickly. However, this is the problem that I'm seeing with Hegarty. I think it's like everything else. People get attached to these programs And I really think it's still about pedagogy, because what I'm seeing is a misalignment in terms of a lot of scope and sequences of what I'm seeing in phonics programs, and what Hegarty is saying to do doesn't align. And that's causing a lot of confusion in a lot of kids' brains, because a lot of kids are still working on mastering a CBC word. And now Hegarty is all of a sudden doing a blend, which can be confusing to some kids. I got pushback. A district person was like, oh, that's okay. I don't know if it's okay. What is the data saying? What do the kids need? I think that the key for me and my teachers is I'm trying to explain the difference between integrity and fidelity. If you know what your kids need, in my opinion, you can take words from what they're learning in phonics and integrate it into that program. But I don't think everybody's there yet. And I don't think all administrators nationwide have a full understanding of what that means. So I'm looking to Marianne and Harriet and Faith for some clarity.
Can I add to something Judy said, or let Marianne clarify? Judy mentioned spelling, and I don't think we've said yet, and Marianne, correct me if I'm wrong, what your meta-analysis showed that you published in January of 2024 was that with or without letters, phonemic awareness outcomes were the same, but there were better reading and spelling outcomes with letters. Is that correct?
So that's what the National Reading Panel found. So most of our phonemic awareness meta and the ones, when you look at phonemic awareness outcomes, you usually don't see a difference whether you use letters or not, because these are assessed, the phonemic awareness tasks are assessed oral only, right? Where you see the difference is that connection to reading and spelling. Right. So the newest meta-analysis that came out at the beginning of 2025, it was, I think it's Stalega and Devin Kearns came out with one in Scientific Studies of Reading that directly looked at reading and spelling outcomes when you compare oral only PA to print-based instruction, and found exactly what you said, that when you compare those two on reading and spelling outcomes, oral only PA does not hold up as much as print-based instruction.
Right? So here's my question. All right. Why do we have this going on? Could you make us of this for us?
Can I give a timeline for her to make sense? We should mention your meta-analysis was January 2024. The PA guide was August 2024. In that PA guide, there's a paragraph that goes to great lengths to say teaching practice should shift in response to new evidence. Now, some would say the evidence was old because of the National Reading Panel, but they had access to your meta-analysis, and am I right? It's not in the citations?
It is not cited in this guide. No, ma'am.
So that's Faith. That's your question.
I was kind of alluding to that, like just trying to move us in this direction as to why. I don't understand what is going on here. I feel like every time I turn around, it seems like there's a reason that is not apparent to most people. But if we dig a little deeper, there has to be something else going on. What are some of your thoughts here?
Can I just say something, Faith? This is getting kind of juicy, and I'm kind of loving it. It's way better than anything I've seen on Netflix in a while. I'm gonna just like pretend I'm reading.
Well, you know something? I know it's like radio silence, but I think like the elephant in the room here is that people want to hold on to their research. You know, am I saying this right? That they really want to protect their standing. They want to protect what they've built, and they want to clarify it and make it work in their favor without really looking, I mean, they have to know that you had this, right? I can't imagine that they didn't know that you came out with this huge study.
Possible, can we give people the benefit of the doubt that
Okay,
maybe
let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they didn't see it. They're all very smart people. Wouldn't they be able to read the research? No?
I the only, I don't know these researchers personally, I haven't met them. The one thing that makes me question is there's a sentence in this guide that says recent meta-analyses of teaching PA have done nothing to change these conclusions.
Right.
So it's like you refer to the fact that maybe more recent meta-analyses like ours and Stillega's and them have come out, but you're saying they don't change your mind about what you're recommending, even though a good chunk of what you're recommending is what we recommend. They also, in those same paragraphs, seem to suggest exactly what we suggest, that you move quickly with Elkonin boxes and adding the letters in, replacing some of the tokens with letter tiles and these kinds of things. And it's like they'll make that suggestion and then the next sentence they'll say, but keep your oral only token PA. And it's like, I don't know where the disconnect is. In trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, I love Judy, I wonder if they worry that if that teachers will forget about PA, and even in their phonics, maybe they won't be quite as explicit as they do need to be in teaching blending and segmenting, let's say that. And they're worried if we push too much away from this focus on phonemic awareness, that people will stop being very explicit in teaching the blending and segmenting within their phonics instruction. Perhaps, let's say that.
Two really important points. One, silent phonics, which is why if phonics doesn't work, and if people point to, oh, we did phonics, we tried that, reading first, we tried phonics, it didn't work. But if we were doing silent phonics and we weren't facilitating orthographic mapping, now, doesn't orthographic mapping compel us to do phonemic awareness with letters? I mean, now that we know the importance of orthographic mapping, and Judy, when did you discover it? I mean, I mentioned before, this is only in the last 7 or 8 years that I've really gotten to know about orthographic mapping. So that's
I think for me, the weirdest part is that I learned about it in reading recovery, which everybody hates. But how did reading recovery get this topic kind of right?
Did they use the word? Did they use the phrase orthographic mapping? No,
they may have.
They may have. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Here's who else.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm not.
Here's who else got it right. Diane McGinnis. Linguistic phonics. Speech to print has an inherent phonological component. So, Marianne.
But Harriet, can you tell me though? Like, I don't know the answer because I'm not like sitting with my old Marie Clay books. Where did they get this idea from? So they got something right. I want to know what was it probably based on? It was very detailed.
Well, Elkonin boxes have been around, right?
But I wonder, did they follow a researcher or a study in particular? Like, it was the biggest part of our writing portion. It was like the main focus. Like,
but I think Marianne, you've said something very profound. In other words, that is a legitimate concern. What if we got rid of oral only PA and then people were doing ineffective phonics instruction? That's why Faith and Judy need to do more shows on effective phonics instruction.
Well, here's the issue. And Harriet, I think you are 100% right. I think a lot of people speak from an OG perspective. And, I don't think many people are aware of linguistic phonics, speech to print. It's certainly now picking up steam, but it has not been something that a lot of people were trained in. You and I, Harriet, were very fortunate that we were in on this many years ago. But if you don't know, you can't see how efficient it is from the start. That right away you hear a word, you're segmenting the word, and the letters are right there for you to build the word.
Right.
And you don't have any other choice but to build it. And you are, it's a byproduct. The phonemic awareness is a byproduct of word building. It's happening naturally.
And there are 7 objections that they make in the guide to PA with letters. But all of them are easily addressed. One is, what if the child doesn't know their letter sounds? Well, before you do the word building, they pull out the letters they're going to be working with. They're also on the whiteboard. They are building, they are saying the sound, they're writing the sound. It's all integrated. And we're teaching them the orthographic patterns and the letter sounds as we're doing the phonemic awareness. Now, I think this is something that will interest all of you. A few days ago, I gave one of my first graders the PAST, the David Kilpatrick's Phonemic Awareness Skills Test. Is that what it stands for? Yeah. Because for the first time, I take 6 students from each first and second grade classroom. And this first grade teacher decided to send me her top readers for me to do acceleration because she didn't feel she could handle that. And she was going to work with her other students. And I have a student who is reading at least 1.5 years. I got her in October, first grader, reading at the second grade level or even higher, and she's only progressed. But as issues came up within the class with doing phonemic awareness little tasks, not that I give them to them, but it just happened to come up, her PA skills seemed to be off. So I gave her the PAST, and she is a reader and a speller, and she's above grade level. She could not do the deletion and the substitution. And we know, I've heard this from other researchers as well. I mean, the word was sneak, and she was asked to remove the n to get seek, and she said see. And then the word was sweep, and she was asked to change the w to l to get sleep, and she said sweal. Am I supposed to teach her phonemic awareness? Do phonemic awareness exercises, and that's one of the things they say in the guide. They say, oh, if you do it this way, they won't learn the phonemic awareness task, as if that's the goal.
Right, that's the end goal.
That's the end goal.
Right. So, Marianne, I want to go right to this guide, okay? So, in the guide, they have 3 questions in section 4. And it's questions about teaching phonemic awareness and letters. What do I teach first? Letter names or phonological awareness? Should phonemic awareness instruction use letters? Is phonics instruction alone sufficient to help all children become independent readers? Now, this is where it gets confusing, right? We need you to sort this out because there's a lot of confusion right there.
Can we tackle that last question first?
I don't care what order you go.
Okay. I'll go in order then. So the first question of which do you teach first doesn't make sense to me. We would teach them both at the same time. It's like saying you teach the bottom half of the rope before you teach the top half of the rope. Like, why would we? It's rarely either or. It's usually a both and in education, right? And so the tasks that we've been sharing, those things where we're talking about, if I've got students and they're just learning letter sounds, I can start to teach phoneme isolation. First sound, we're listening for that sound, that letter, those letters that we're focusing on this week. So we're pulling some words out that have that first sound. We're isolating that first sound. We're writing that letter. Like, why are we separating these things? It's much more efficient for our use of time to combine these things into one. They don't have to be able to do the whole word. They don't have to know all of their letters. We can focus on the letters that they do know, keep tokens for the parts that they don't know yet, and keep adding letters on as they master more and more letters, and we introduce more and more graphemes to go with these phonemes that they're learning, right? So it's a both and for that first one. I think our research and the research of many other people have strongly supported that combining phonemic awareness instruction with letters is the most efficient use of your time. It's not that you won't get some effective oral only phonemic awareness on reading and spelling. The National Reading Panel showed, yes, you do. Stillegan again showed, yes, you will, but you'll get more if you add letters to it. And as Harriett has pointed out, our teachers are stretched for time. There is so much to teach to get kids to read. Why would we separate these things out into separate chunks when we can do it all in one piece? And as far as the phonics instruction, I just think that these are terms that we're stuck on. And I pulled it from the National Reading Panel because they said that although phonemic awareness and phonics are two separate concepts, right? The phonemic awareness is about hearing the sounds and the phonics is about the print that gets attached to it. They said when you do PA with letters, it counts as phonics instruction. So why can't we see that these can be combined? Like they said it in there. They said PA with oral only does not count as phonics instruction because there's no print attached. But when you add letters, it now counts as phonics instruction. So these aren't separate things. These are the same thing. So I want teachers to understand, like we do.
Sorry, I need to interrupt.
Yep.
Faith, I still didn't put batteries in. Please give her cheers, please, please. I beg you.
I'm going to give both of our guests big cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it was
They're
time.
doing an amazing job. But I also have the BS button here.
Uh-oh.
And I want you calling BS. Don't be afraid. You're allowed to do it on this show.
Oh my God, you're so supportive, Faith.
Thank you. Yeah, there were several. I mean, as soon as Harriett sent me this, she can tell you, I sent her back an email with 3 exact things from there and how the research was misrepresented in some way, and so I don't like when people do that. And that's always one of the concerns just for teachers out there to know, not that peer review is a perfect process, but when something is in a peer reviewed journal, other people who have no idea who those researchers were have reviewed it without knowing who you were and said, this line doesn't make sense. This line doesn't make sense. This isn't the right citation for this. They will tear your work apart until it gets as good as it can be. It's not perfect. Not everything gets caught, but it's a good start. These guides, unfortunately, nobody, it wouldn't appear other than the people who were working on it, peer reviewed it. And it took me, Harriett, less than 24 hours. And I responded with, this study's been misrepresented. This study's been misrepresented. So I don't like when people do that to just support their plan that they're, like I said, it's not what they said was wrong about what the ARIES study that they cited. It's just they left out a key piece that was important, that they learned. The students who worked with letter tiles were better at the taught phonemes than the students who didn't work with letter tiles. Why wouldn't you say that?
Well, Judy, I'm going to jump to you for a moment. So this selective attention reminds me of balanced literacy. And the same people who call out balanced literacy, I don't mean exactly the same people, but the same crowd, right? An SOR crowd calling out balanced literacy for, selectively leaving out certain information and kind of tweaking it in their favor. I've said this for a long time. No one gets a pass here. And if something doesn't make sense, shouldn't we be talking about it and questioning? And I have nothing against anybody, but this is not a personal attack here. This is about trying to get answers and doing what's right by the kids. So Judy, does this not remind you of some balanced literacy problems? I don't know.
I think there's big problems in the current state of literacy, and it actually makes me sick to my stomach. And it actually is part of the reason that I had a hard time coming into the structured literacy world, because I felt that there's too many people that are know-it-alls and are not reflective and are not, flexible. And, I'm seeing a lot of BS lately, and it makes me so uncomfortable because that's hypocritical. Because imagine I stayed stuck in my ways of my old training on how to teach kids to decode, which was so flawed and not research and evidence based. That would be a crime, and it's unacceptable. And I think that it's time to even update the past test. Like, I've given that test to kids, and some of the highest strands are so difficult for kids that already have totally broken the code. I can't do some of the strands. So I don't know. I know, like, some of the beginning pieces gave me a lot of information, but if you really look at that assessment and look at the really complex things, are they up to date with what's needed to become a successful reader? I'm not sure. And I think that we have a responsibility when the research and evidence changes to, say, hey, something changed. I think we are responsible to do that. And if we don't do that, we're acting irresponsibly, and it's not okay. And this is definitely not a personal attack, but my loyalty is to the kids that are in those classrooms, because
100%.
they don't have years to wait.
Exactly.
And they can't wait till you let go of belief systems that are no longer valid.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Right.
And then
protect them on your resume.
it's not cool. It's not cool. And what disappoints me is that some really big names are on there, and people are really attached to names rather than being attached to the research and evidence. And why this was ignored or is being brushed aside or not being prioritized is very concerning to me. And I hope that when we release this episode, I'm okay with people, discussing it, challenging it, questioning it, and having those serious conversations. I don't think this is a I got you kind of situation. I think it's more of a let's talk about what's going on. And if the other side has some legitimate, reasons, I want to hear it. I think that we have to have a serious discussion, and I welcome them to message us on the Literacy View and come on. But don't shy away. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend you didn't see our message when we invite you on.
Yes. So now I want to jump to Harriett. Harriett sent me an article just the other day, and she said, Faith, did you see this? Which is usually how I start my day off. Harriett messaging me, Faith, did you see this?
Wait, did she usually message you before I do at 5:25?
No, you are my early bird. She's in California. So you and I talk before I speak to Harriett. But somewhere along the way, I'm also talking to Harriett or texting Harriett. And this article was a hoot. So she sent me something that someone wrote, and it was about how, in people in structured literacy think everything they do is the gold standard. And they're not open, kind of like what you just said, Judy, that they're not open to listening to other people. And there's room for more than one idea. So Harriett, why don't you talk about that a little bit and how that maybe fits in with the conversation that we're having here? Because you've been trying, I know, for a while. I give you so much credit. I can't do what you do. Every day you're going back with these long responses, and you have a lot to say, and you call out the BS, but I don't know how you do it. But let's hear about what you're thinking. You're muted. Unmute.
Okay. All right. Great question. I'm thinking that we really have to take what Marianne said, because I have not heard anybody else state this as a legitimate reason about the fear of giving up oral-only PA. And this whole thing about how are we teaching phonics? And what you just said, there are structured literacy programs that maybe aren't teaching it the best way. And if we're not adding, if we're not having orthographic mapping as the cornerstone of what we do, if we're not integrating, so the thing is, OM settles the question right there. You have to integrate phonology with orthography. What does that mean? PA with letters. That settles that. But there's also, I've been thinking about, so set for variability is is hugely important. Flexible pronunciations.
Let's just, I know what you're talking about, but let's just make sure our audience knows some of the terminology, because we don't want them turning it off saying, okay, this is over my head. Yeah. Just explain what you mean.
So I had a second grader reading a sentence about the feather in the nest. Feather did not make sense. So he knows to try a different sound and listen for a word he knows. And he does know the word feather. EA is generally E. It's sometimes E. And our students have to be flexible. But what's interesting is, and I learned this from my phonographics training, and I don't know that I fully understood it at the time, you have to be able to do phonemic substitution to implement flexible pronunciations. He's got to have a sense. So if I just gave a generic, try a different sound, does he know which of the sounds in feather he got wrong? Number one. And oftentimes they do. Or I will say, you said E, try E. He is substituting. When we do those phonemic awareness tasks,
the manipulation
tasks, that is one of the things that we're doing. Well, if you're integrating phonology and orthography, if the kids are constantly in those of us who were trained by Diane McGinnis or in speech to print, saying the sound or saying the grapheme, saying the phoneme as they write the grapheme. So they're constantly making that connection. And there are always those, either the tiles or on their whiteboards or on my whiteboard, they are actually doing these very important phonemic awareness tasks like substitution. Set for very flexible pronunciations only exist if you can substitute. So we have to bring it into our phonics instruction.
But doesn't this go back to training? Judy and I have been talking about this. I don't know, probably comes up on every show. I mean, we have shirts made up that say, all of these types of things, which I'll plug our website. You should take a look at our merch. It's a lot of fun. But we say this all the time, that it's about teacher knowledge. So if you have a lousy phonics program that you're stuck with, but you know better, then you can do better. And, and then if you have a decent phonics program, but it still has gaps, well, if you know better, you can fill in the gaps. And then if you have a really great phonics program that seems to be doing everything you want, well, good for you. That makes you a better teacher, doesn't it? Because you already have a good program and you've seen success with it, like true success. But it all goes back to exposure and being able to learn from different programs and different.
Exactly, Faith. You hit it on the money. And it also comes to not being overly attached to doing a lot of phonemic awareness when kids don't need it. I see a lot of schools that are overly attached to, no, you still have to do Haggerty. But if your whole class is reading and is fluent and can read 150 words a minute, what are you doing? Is that the best use of your time too? So we have to be really mindful of what is our data saying? What do our kids need? And I want to come back to something else that I said before, because I really want some clarity. So what do we do if scope and sequences are not aligning and we're seeing kids getting confused? What if a principal is saying, no, you have to follow this, you have to follow Haggerty, this is what it says. And I'm not saying this is my school, because it's not, because we're moving into integrity rather than fidelity. But I want to hear, you guys know more about this topic than I do. What is your professional recommendation when the scope and sequences don't match? What do we as teachers do?
And by the way, I just want to say with Judy, this is why I love Judy. All right. On a podcast in front of all these people, like, I need clarity. You know something more than I know. I want to learn from you. We try to model that openness so that people aren't afraid to ask. Just because you've taught a lot of years doesn't mean there's not room to grow. I just had to say that. Sorry. Go back to Judy's question.
That was very sweet. And then right after Faith, I have one more data related question that I think teachers will appreciate. So I won't hog up all your time, Faith, but I do have one pertinent question.
Yeah, I appreciate that about you all. And yeah, I will be the first to admit, and I'm not afraid to admit that I made mistakes. I just filed a correction on a study that we found a small mistake. Luckily, it didn't affect anything, but I'll be the first one to put it out there, because I don't want anyone to ever be like, oh, you got it wrong. And yep, I did. I'll fix that. No problem. I think that's the way research should be, because as humans, it's impossible to ever not make mistakes. That's just the way it is. So just keep growing, right? As far as your question, Judy, I think there isn't a lot of great research on this. So let me start that. The scope and sequence piece is definitely something that there could be more research around. But I think what would make the most sense to me, based on just being in the classroom for a long time and what I do know about the research, is you do want them more aligned. And so a lot of these core programs, that's what I am still wondering, like, why so many schools want to adopt extra upon extra upon extra, have some of this phonemic awareness built in that is aligned with what the phonemes and graphemes that are being taught at that time. And that just makes more sense. Again, not saying that a couple of minutes of doing a couple of oral only tasks with some phonemes that are being then brought right into your phonics lesson is wrong. It absolutely is correct. As long as it's connected to what you're going to do in phonics, it makes a lot of sense to me. And Harriet, you're right. There's so much phonemic awareness that's built into so much of the phonics that we do when you think about blending, segmenting. And then a lot of the core programs I've been looking at, like chaining, is a huge piece and has good research behind it, which is substitution and deletion and all of those things. So it just makes more sense to me to teach those. And you do some where you're like, change the M to J, what's the new word? Or you say, change the J to what's that new word? Like you do it both ways. So they're getting exposed to it, in a variety of ways in some of the chaining that I've seen. So it just seems like if you have a good phonics program, or like you said, if you can do it, I don't know why you need a separate program that isn't aligned to what you're doing in phonics.
So to wrap up, I want to hear last.
You got to give me one more chance. Chance.
Sorry, one more. Go ahead.
I promise. Okay, so in the field, this is what I'm seeing from some kids, and I know that it ties into all of this. I'm seeing kids that are almost fluent readers in first grade. When you give them the nonsense word fluency assessment, they're struggling with it. They've learned about closed syllables. They know about short vowels. They look at it and they're sounding words out, but yet they're fluent readers. I don't know if this ties in directly. Can you give us some feedback? We have 1 month of school left. We want to shift outcomes. And I know this relates probably to both phonics and probably phonemic awareness. Help, ladies.
So tell me a little more. So when they're sounding out, they're still sounding out a nonsense word rather than just being able to like pronounce it all at once.
The fluent readers can read books, are starting to tackle multisyllabic words. All of a sudden, you see some kids, you show them the nonsense word fluency assessment. Puh, ag, pog, meth. I'm like, whoa, why? There must be some gaps in instruction somewhere. What's going on, ladies?
But they sound fluent on real words, yes? So they're not doing that on real words? I think
if I put in real CVC words, it might, I don't know. Just when you give a regular book, they're reading fine.
So here's where I noticed a difference. I have used and also used as a model the United Kingdom's alien names, which is really clever because it makes it meaningful. This is, they're the great pictures of the aliens. And I added my own because I wanted to assess, think of Shrek, right? Shrek is a nonsense word, or it's the name of a monster. And they were doing better on the nonsense words when they were reading the names of these aliens. So is it for them that it's just more meaningful? I don't know.
And I would agree. That's one thought. And that's exactly what I was thinking too. So Judy, even if you're giving an NWF, you could tell the kids, these are just like make-believe names. They're like,
I did it like 50
Martian names.
I did. I told them, imagine there's a little breve on top of it. You know, all these vowels make a short sound. We do blending lines. It's just something I don't know.
What I'm talking about is connecting.
Knowing that it's a fake word.
Well, that a name is something they can wrap their heads around. So it's like, oh, if they're reading something, oh, the reason I have to sound this out, it's because it's someone's name, not because it's nonsense. That's what I believe Harriett is talking about here, that the idea of saying it's a Martian name and add, something that they could say to themselves, oh, this is something real because other people have names and I have to learn those names, as opposed to
very interesting.
And it's nonsense. They do that in the UK. That's their phonics check, and they use that kind of direction. But
that's interesting. But what I'm wondering, and I know we have to wrap up soon, does this potentially mean that there was some gap in their phonemic awareness or phonics instruction that's causing this malfunction?
So I'll throw in two other thoughts here around this, and that's back to orthographic mapping, right? The way we store words in our brain so that we can recognize them by sight, like Ari says, right, is that you've mapped that phonology and print together several times. Your brain stores it. So when I see that name or that word again, I just can recognize it by sight after mapping it several times and storing that in my brain. I've never seen a nonsense word. That's why we use them for assessment, because you're trying to see, can they apply their skills in decoding to a word they've never seen that I know can't be stored in their brain by sight yet. And so it doesn't surprise me that they would have to sound that word out. They shouldn't have ever seen it before because it's a make-believe word that's just on this assessment.
And you're saying that might be healthy behavior, but yet that healthy.
But if they're having to sound out if they're having to sound out letter by letter, right, then I would say they're not quite to that consolidated alphabetic phase as Ari talks about, right? They're not able to chunk bigger chunks of sounds together to get through that word at a faster pace. And so that might be what they need next, is being able to get to bigger chunks of a word. Like when I see Faith's last name, I'll use that one, right? Like, and I've never seen it before. I'm not going to know it. I'm going to chunk it, but I'm going to see chunks of boar, cow, ski, right?
Yeah, and I'm seeing them seeing
do
it really fast. A lot of those kids are seeing the initial letter and then the rhyme and blending it together. But they're just, I wish there was more of that automaticity. But yes, sometimes there is this frustration with the nonsense word fluency task. And now all of a sudden I went into the copy room and I see a million nonsense word fluency things. And I'm like, is this the best use of our time? We want kids to become fluent readers, and many of them are pretty close to being fluent. And now everybody's like panicking because they want their data to shift. And, you know, and I almost feel hypocritical because I've been telling them for a while and coaching them that it's not really about the nonsense word. It's more about understanding the way words work and about the orthography. So it's just, you know, a little bit puzzling, but
it could also be just another thought. I don't know. It could be because these kids are pretty good readers, they might be afraid of getting something wrong. And they already are at a high level. And now you're giving them something they want to really check themselves to make sure that they have all these sounds. And obviously it slows them down and it gives them a poor score.
Well, I wish I could throw that task out for those kids, to be honest. Faith.
I mean, I don't know what the reason is, but we're just presenting thoughts. It could be that, you know what, I could read, now I'm doing this. Oh, you know what, I want to make sure I'm right here. So
can I give some breaking news?
Go ahead.
All right, so I got a text today, something interesting that's on this coming out for screeners. I don't have it officially in writing, but it's hot off the press. It says Acadians is coming out with a decodable text measure and a spelling measure in fall of 2026. Decodable text measure is the bridge between nonsense word fluency and oral reading fluency. So I know it was in the study phases. I was given the chance to experiment with it. I didn't have time. So that's just something for us all to keep our eyes open. And I think it's because that we've all been giving a lot of feedback because there has been such a drastic jump from nonsense word fluency to oral reading fluency.
I think some people will be very happy about that because especially in the early grades, when they haven't been taught the whole code, right? That you feel giving these kids an ORF when they haven't even gotten through the instruction is not really a great assessment for them. So here's an in-between type of task. Are they able to succeed with the work that they're getting? So that makes sense to me. That's cool information. All right, ladies, let's wrap this baby up. Who wants to jump in and just give their last thoughts? Don't all jump at once. Go ahead, Harriet.
I want to refer to one of the objections they made. They said, if you teach PA with letters, you won't know if they've made a phonemic error or a phonics error. But you will know. And I'm thinking, you know, one of the sorting tasks that I do is when I introduce AI and AY. So if I dictate the word brain and they make it as BAIN, that's a phonemic problem, not a phonics problem. If they make it as BRAYN, that's a problem with orthography. That's a phonics problem. If they make it as BAYN, it's both phonemic and phonics. So Marianne's next project is to write new curriculum that really, but she's right, we have to give credit. A lot of programs do have word chains. That is something that is excellent and it's becoming more popular. I don't know if these same programs are also doing oral only or not, but that is the way to go. That is the most efficient. I feel like the title of Zach Rochelle's new book, I really want, you know, just tell them, I really want the researchers to just tell us.
can't. They can't because they don't agree themselves.
I know what I'm saying. They need to get in a room and duke it out. Yeah.
Oh, I think, well, I want to hear what Marianne has to say, and then I have some last thoughts.
So I'll say, like, I love that, Harriet, and I absolutely agree with that. I see the efficiency piece of teaching them both together. I think there's plenty of research that supports that teaching them together is an efficient use of teachers' time. I encourage teachers to stay explicit, especially around that blending and segmenting piece for students. And if you have a kid who makes the error that you referred to at last, that BAYN for brain, take it back, think of, break it, finger tap, tokens, see where that is, where that struggle was, and then you know exactly what to do. It comes back to that teacher knowledge piece, right? So have them do it oral only for a sec. Could they do it oral only, or not, with tokens to represent each one? And then when they started writing, they got mixed up and they forgot one. There's so many pieces of that. So I just encourage teachers to not focus on one or the other, think about how to be efficient, and then all of these little things that we're still not quite sure about. I would love to do those studies. So if you want me to come to your classroom and we can set up, some kids get letter tiles and some kids get tokens and like test it head to head, you let me know and we'll set it up. So,
Judy, any last thoughts? Because I have a couple.
No, I think I talked a lot tonight. I think I'm done.
All right, here's my last thought. The same way we said that publishers really have to move out of the way a little bit and stop taking the lead, I think researchers, you are driving us crazy, okay? You're driving the teachers crazy. And you need to get your act together and talk to each other and read each other's work, because this is unfair to teachers that they're getting these mixed messages. So those are my last thoughts.
Faith, I'm going to have to make a little soundbite of that. I'm technologically challenged, but I just got to make a soundbite of what you just said. That's crazy.
Can I say one short thing? I have Elkonin boxes, a set of 4, taped to my intervention tables. If I were in charge of a kindergarten class or a first grade class, I would have them taped to everybody's table. It is so convenient to clarify, to tap out the phonemes, to move a token, and you don't know who's going to struggle or when they're going to struggle. So that is my recommendation. Get yourself Elkonin boxes and tape them to the tables.
And I'll tape my mouth shut now. We're ending this.
New studies that say you sleep better if you tape your mouth shut. My niece just sent me a picture of her mouth shut.
I'm sorry, I have to say it. It works. I do it. So don't make fun. Nose breathing is the way to go. The final tip.
The final tip. All right. You can't say you don't learn a lot on the Literacy View. All right, ladies, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. We so appreciate you joining us. And, our listeners, again, this is not about an attack, but, the Literacy View's tagline is real teachers letting loose. And I got to tell you, we're letting loose because we're frustrated. And we really thank people for clarifying this message. We need this conversation. And as Judy said, if anybody else wants to come on and counter that with some hard evidence, we're open to listening. Okay, it's a wrap. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.